in this country. In case the Supreme Court also upholds the death sentence, Mr. Kasab has another option of taking his mercy petition to the president of this country. Now, usually in the past, we've seen in such cases that it's a fairly long, drawn-out process. It takes many years before the case can come to any logical end. Mr. Kasab's defense team, of course, have been maintaining that their client is innocent, that he was merely manipulated by armed insurgent groups in Pakistan who asked him to carry out these attacks in India. But the judges at today's High Court in Maharashtra, they were quite clear. They used some very strong language in their judgment. They said that Mr. Kasab was personally responsible for the deaths of 7 people, including a top counter-terrorism official, and that this was not just any attack, but this was an attack on India's sovereignty. Mr. Kasab, who wasn't at the court proceedings at that time, he was actually watching all of this from his prison cell via video conference, didn't visibly react when the verdict was read out.
In China, a severe drought has forced the government to look for alternative ways to find water. But as Melissa Chan finds out, this may create an even bigger problem.
Rows and rows of young wheat crop, tufts amidst the dry brown land. They say it's the worst drought Shandong province has seen in 200 years. China's in a crisis, but this is one for the world to watch as well.
Food security in China affects food security globally, simply because of China's population. So if our production's cut and we begin importing food, that would raise the cost of food globally.
Officials have come up with the slogan, "Fight the drought, dig the well." At this site, they've been working for about a week now, and the plan is to dig 60 meters deep into the ground.
Pulling up groundwater to irrigate the fields. It's a strategy officials have deployed time and again. But by tackling one problem, they've created another. Groundwater in China is fast disappearing, with workers boring deeper and deeper every year. Depressions dot the North China Plain here, where the earth floor sinks into former water cavities. Combined with the fact much of the water in the country is polluted, that leaves very little fresh water for farmers to use and people to drink. Farmer Kong Ling-he did not wait for the government to step in, but in desperation dug his own well to save his wheat crop.
In the beginning, I could pull water up every 2 days, then every 15. There's less and less.
After this, there is nothing else. When water tables fall, springs dry up, rivers stop flowing, and lakes disappear. The well-intentioned efforts here will actually dig China into a deeper hole. Melissa Chan, AlJazeera, Shandong Province, China.
I'm Shirley Ghosh with the headlines here on Al Jazeera. Witnesses have told Al Jazeera that more than 60 people have been killed in violence on Monday in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Security forces have reportedly started looting banks and other government institutions. We're also getting reports that the People's Convention Hall was set on fire. And in the last hour, Libya's justice minister has resigned in protest at the use of violence against anti-government demonstrators. Meanwhile, protesters say they've taken control of Libya's second city, Benghazi. Eyewitnesses have told us the cities of Al-Baida and Sebha are also in the hands of the opposition. Well, earlier, the son of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi appeared on state television, warning of civil war.
We will not give up Libya. We will fight until the last man, the last woman, until the last bit of energy. We will not leave our country to let Al Jazeera laugh at us, Al Arabiya or the BBC or any traitors who live abroad. We will not allow that.
In Yemen, witnesses in the southern city of Aden say a teenager has been killed and 4 others injured in fighting with soldiers. Protesters have gathered in the capital Sana'a for an 11th straight day of anti-government demonstrations. President Ali Abdullah Saleh has described calls for regime change as unacceptable. A group calling itself the Youth of February 14th is calling for security officials to be tried for attacks on protesters in Bahrain. Mobile clinics have been set up in the capital Manama to treat protesters injured in confrontations with security forces. 8 people have been killed so far in violence between security forces and protesters. An Indian court upheld the death sentence for the sole surviving gunman of the 2008 Mumbai attacks. Mohammad Ajmal Amir Kasab was found guilty last May for his part in attacks which killed 166 people and injured more than 300 others. A suicide blast in Afghanistan's Kunduz province has killed at least 26 people and injured 36 others. The bomber detonated explosives at the entrance to a government office where people were queuing for ID cards. Local officials say all the dead are civilians and they included children. And a suicide bomber in Iraq has killed at least 10 people and wounded 15 others. The attack in the northern city of Samarra targeted a police building used to shelter Shia pilgrims. Those are the main stories. The news will continue on Al Jazeera at the top of the hour. After Egypt burning, the next programme coming up. Stay with us.
Began as a demonstration and turned into a revolution. 2 weeks of anti-government protests and Egypt is on a knife edge. Hosni Mubarak declares he won't run again for president. His son, Gamal, has been ruled out as the next in line. And a vice president, Omar Suleiman, has been appointed for the first time in 30 years. Egypt's health ministry says 11 people have been killed. But agencies report more than 300 deaths, with thousands more wounded. When protests began on the 25th of January, peaceful demonstrations were met with a brutal police force. As the calls for regime change move into their third week, Egyptians have broken down the barrier of fear. But cracks between the protesters have started to show.
What was really interesting about the third week of these protests is that everyone was talking about the momentum and momentum being lost, but the momentum that was being lost wasn't actually inside Liberation Square, where people were very much still united together in this quest to bring down Hosni Mubarak. The momentum that was changing was outside of the square in the other parts of Cairo and beyond, where people had started to say, well, listen, Hosni Mubarak has now said that he won't run again. You only have to bear him for another few months. Why don't the protesters just leave the square? They've got what they want. So people were talking about a loss of momentum, but we never felt that inside Liberation Square. We only felt it outside.
I announced that I will similarly remain adamant to continue to shoulder my responsibility.
An immovable head of state and resolute protesters standing firm on their call for the